Well, Richard, welcome to SDTS.
Thank you.
The next big thing, as Eric likes to call it.
It's great to be here. Yeah, my first time.
Yeah. It's interesting to have Fundamental VR be here at this conference. I have my own thoughts about why it's so ideal for you to be here with the technology and your team. What's got your interest in coming here this year?
Well, this is renowned as a real centre for innovation, particularly in soft tissue surgical spaces, in the robotic space, and those are areas that we are really focused on at the moment in terms of the innovation that's happening there. Just lends itself perfectly to the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And Fundamental VR has an expertise in, and for our viewers that might not yet be aware, an expertise in virtual reality training, simulation training, but not exclusively to soft tissue.
Correct. Yeah. No, we work across a multitude of different areas. So we, from orthopedics through to the whole soft tissue area, interventional, cardiovascular, ophthalmology. We've not really found, when it comes to the tech side of what we do, we haven't really found a limitation to the platform. It's the innovations within those different verticals that have really driven adoption of our platform in those areas.
What I really love is I love how non-medtech companies have really got a seat at the table now as tech companies that are going to move these incredibly progressive platforms forward, and even some of the fundamental, as you pointed, interventional cardiology catheter-based technologies forward. So how would you characterize Fundamental VR? I characterize it, you're a tech company that is using real cutting-edge technologies in order to facilitate uptake, training, adoption, maybe even acceleration through clinical trials. But how would you best characterize it?
I think you're spot on. I think, as a business, we are a technology business that's chosen to pick that immersive spatial computing space and the haptic space and really meld those two together. We're at the intersection of those two. And the most satisfying sector to apply that to is the medical one, which is why we've created fundamental surgery and been focused in this area for nearly 9 years. So we are a tech business with a medical vertical application. But we go much wider than that. The intersection of the physical with the virtual is really the next frontier of that technology. So we've been in that space for, say, 7 or 8 years now. So we've been working hard to really evolve that through with probably the hardest use case. The physical and the visual interaction with the human body. A, it's very complex. B, it's really important to get it exactly right.
Yeah, especially in your application, your point of application, right? We're training. I was just down in the simulator downstairs, and I was mentioning this is my very first time in VR. And
you did brilliantly.
Thank you. And it was, I really felt like I was there from the haptic side, and I want to jump into that because that's really, you're a pioneer there with Fundamental VR. And other tech organizations are probably looking at you because you have created this fundamental, no pun intended, but that's nice. When we talk about intuitive stuff, intuitive gets the head nod. Fundamental gets the head nod. But this haptic feel when I had the ultrasound probe in my hand and I was inserting the needle, and it felt just like the anatomy if there was a person laying there on my virtual table.
Yeah, there is no substitute for hands-on experience. And it's great, but you saw it both with and without in those two different environments. And I think that's the point. In so many cases, if you're learning procedural knowledge, that first stage of understanding, then perhaps you don't need that hands-on experience. You just need to understand the steps and the process, and that works brilliantly with devices like this, standalone headsets. But when you want to get into muscle memory, into understanding what it feels like to get it right and wrong, and to also try different scenarios, well, then you need that hands-on experience. And so it's been the difficult path to create that, for sure, over the last few years, but creating what we call a haptic intelligence engine that's agnostic of hardware. You were holding a grounded device, but it could be a glove that's agnostic of those different devices that can replicate those sophisticated interactions of soft tissue on soft tissue, like this, or hard tissue on hard tissue, or hard tissue on soft tissue. Those computations, we've built up an enormous library to allow us to really bring that to market, to have an impact, which is a really simple one in this space, which is about lowering the learning curve, moving people through that journey faster, because repetition of those muscle memory skills is hard to get, and we can deliver that through the platform.
And it's funny you bring that up. I was here yesterday, early before the SDTS conference, and I was visiting a surgical robotics company, and the conversation going on between a couple of executives there, they were talking about a simulator they had at a hospital where they have one of their systems, and they were especially cognizant of the number of hours that the simulator was getting. And it's still early days on this system. But nonetheless, I think there are some leaders that are going to be ahead of the curve and understand that putting a simulation system, a VR system, or even a hard analog simulator is going to get you through clinical trials quicker, is going to drive adoption, is going to help your sales go-to-market team. And it's well worth the investment, especially if you're looking at a large format soft tissue robot, you're probably looking at 10 million, 15 million a month burn rate. What if you get through your clinicals quicker because you had a VR setup in order to accelerate the training program there? And then the surgeon's going through that.
Right.
What's the resistance at this point in time? Is it respectful ignorance in some of these situations?
I think that's often the case. Breaking new ground is hard. When there's unknowns, and it's our job to try and lower the bar there by showing case studies of other systems that have used this and have found that. We have in our platform now, we have soft tissue robotic systems that have yet to clear FDA, but they're already in our system. For all those reasons you said, they're expensive pieces of capital equipment, right? So moving them around and providing hands-on experience is difficult. It's a steep learning curve. If it's 60 cases to move from previous robot or laparoscopic into this robot, getting time on that machine is not going to happen. So simulation, whatever the format of that simulation, is going to be essential. So if you can just remove the friction from that and move people into this environment, then it helps a lot. But I think, and we've talked about it before, people think about their burn rate and they think about the cost of coming to market. And because of the way that the market's worked so far, they probably haven't thought about this as a way of accelerating. But that's exactly what it is. If it's going to take you 60 reps to get there, and you can do 20 of them in one day as opposed to 2, then you get there in 3 days, not in 30 days. That's it's right. As simple as that.
That's right. And with some of these soft tissue robotic platforms, especially, and again, we'll focus on soft tissue robotics as we're here at SDTS, oftentimes people are coming off of a well-known large format soft tissue robotic system, Intuitive, and then potentially considering transitioning to, or at least helping take this other robot through IDE and trials, clinical. Yeah. And so you're not trying to teach somebody robotics, you're trying to teach them the conversion from potentially an Intuitive platform to another platform. So for me, it's less about what does it feel like, it's more about workflow of foot clutches, engagement and the console. What does the console feel like? And so if I've got a clinical trial going on at a hospital in Washington, yeah, why would I not have 3 fundamental VR systems sitting there in addition to my system in order to get that training traction in a lot quicker, training repetition in a lot quicker?
Absolutely, yeah. And the other key point is, the scalability is there because of the physical footprint it takes is so much smaller than those traditional systems, but also the metrics that come off the back of it, around telemetry, around head movement, around where and how your eyes are moving. Those things give you a level of insight that you probably don't get out of the actual system. So it can give you another level, which is really important in that early stage, right? When you're going through the approval process and you're also potentially even trying to understand how it fits and how the ergonomics work for a user, data points on that can be incredibly useful in that design stage.
One of the things that I'm really curious about, and I'm wondering what your comments are on it, let's say it's the last 2 or 3 years, maybe the last 2 years, there's been this big awareness around AI, ChatGPT, and a lot of that enabled by NVIDIA and some of the other AMD, NVIDIA chip manufacturers on that AI side of the business.
Yep.
How has that impacted this category of technology? Has it been an accelerant? And what does that look like if we were to chart it out on a curve? What would it look like in regards to acceleration of that? And what are some of the limiters maybe over the next couple of years?
Yeah, great question. People talk about AI taking the air out of most technology markets at the moment. For us, it's been a really interesting thing to have aligned with the immersive spatial space that we're in. How it's manifested for us? Well, so in production, we start to see massive efficiencies where you can use AI and particularly Gen AI to optimize assets, to bring things through much quicker. And then in procedure and in simulation, starting to really use those large language models to understand behavior and predict what's happening so that we can actually say, well, based on your current telemetry, if you carry on this path, these are the things that are going to happen. So you might want to adjust in this way. So giving that real-time feedback, that's been an interesting part. The GPU capabilities that are coming through from people like NVIDIA and others, all that does for us is it just allows us to put more fidelity into these environments. And we work to the highest fidelity we can achieve. And then we basically have to degrade to the headset or the processing unit that we're working with. So as those get bigger, stronger, and more capable, we can just do more with it. So whether it's intelligence, AI, instruction, chatbots that allow you to just move quicker inside that simulation, or whether it's in the production part of actually putting those simulations in place, it's giving us benefit in both of those two areas. In terms of that trajectory, where are we sitting on that? I think it's a hard one to predict, right? I mean, there's so much moving in this space, but I don't think we've hit the highest point of that inflection yet. I still think we're scaling up at the moment.
Is it fair to say when we think about like these cameras here, they shoot in 4K, yet you can't experience 4K on the internet right now, right? You usually have to dumb it down to 1080, so something is lost there. Will be the limiting factor right now be the hardware, the headsets within reason? And then where does the current gen sit versus what Apple just came out with?
Yeah. So Apple is, in so many ways, it's a real inflection point again. It's the first headset that I've seen for a long time that genuinely has excited and lit up a market. So that says something in itself. You've got, compared to the devices here, and actually we haven't got the latest Meta device here, which is a step up from the ones you see here. But these are fantastic fidelity products. The latest Meta one is another step up from that. But you're going to a whole new stratosphere with the Apple product that's come through. So what does that do for us? Well, it gives us two things. The compute power that sits on the headset is the same as a MacBook Pro. So you've got a full system there. You've got a lot of processing power, a lot of GPU power to use there, firstly. Secondly, the optics that are in front of your eye that deliver that impression, the fidelity of those is significantly higher than anything we've got on the table here. So again, with processing power and physical fidelity within there, we can get to that 4K capability. And so, when you talk to use cases around some of this next gen headsets, you start to think about, in our world, more fidelity, more capability, more realism. But in other use cases, you start to think about, well, actually, that 4K screen that's inside this room doesn't need to be there because it is genuinely on my display in front of my face.
And I found, and one of the things that I don't lose sight of is it's not just the clinician, it's the whole work team. So do you envision a day that the entire work team will have that Apple-like headset on and they'll just be moving around in a barren room that has been designed for an internal experience in a community? Because that's what happened today. When Elliot was taking me through,
Yep.
I didn't feel alone in that room. He was in the simulation with me through audio as well as, through, his avatar, if you will. And so I'm imagining a day, and I'm just curious, you're the expert here. Are we going to, in 5 or 10 years, does the inside of a cath lab look like 6 people with these Apple headsets on as a placeholder for today
Yep.
over a patient, and therefore really starts to become a more intimate environment than the analog one we're in today?
I think so. I think when you think about cath lab, operating room 2050, who's going to design and envision that? Is it the box makers that we have today and the screen makers of today, or is it the spatial computing experts of today and tomorrow? I think the answers to what the OR and the cath lab of 2050 looks like is going to come from Apple, NVIDIA, and Google, as opposed to Stryker, Karl Storz, etc. Or at least some collaboration between the two, because the capabilities that you have here, both in visual, spatial, and computational power, is of a different league to something that we've seen before. So I think maybe not 5 years out, because we both know, right? Ultimately, when you bring this stuff in, it's the workflow that becomes the hardest thing. So you need somebody not only with the technical capability, they also need to have the financial girth to be able to actually put this in and re-educate a market, at least system by system. And I think then you need these trillion-dollar businesses.
Well, I'm going to leave it there on that one. I like that futuristic yet pragmatic and sober answer, because that's where we need to go.
Good to see
Appreciate
you.
your time, Richard, as always.
Great to see you. Thanks, Joe.
I'm Joe Mullings from SDTS, The Next Big Thing. Be well.